Welcome. This Good Friday is usually one of my favorite services of the year. It's one of those services where I don't do any preaching. I get to listen to the choir lead us in special music. I get to read the entire Passion account with the congregation responding at certain points as we join with the crowd, shouting out, "Crucify him, crucify him." There's so many special components of that service, it's impossible to replicate it here in any way. And so this Good Friday, I want to share with you something very special to me. It's a presentation I put together 17 years ago while I was serving at New Life in Glastonbury, Connecticut. It is a visual walk through the Stations of the Cross. The Stations of the Cross is a discipline that allows the pilgrim, the Christian, to travel step by step with Jesus on his journey to the cross. Now, I put this together 17 years ago, and it has visuals. It also has music, but the music was blocked on YouTube. It has copyright, and so I had to take the music out of it. And yet that perhaps makes the devotional part that much more expressive and important. And so I invite you to reserve the next 20 minutes and quiet your heart and light a candle perhaps, darken the room if you're able, perhaps put on some light reflective music, and listen to the voices. At each station, you'll hear three voices. First, you'll hear a voice describing the scene. The second voice, which is a female voice, will speak of the experience of that scene. And then you'll hear a much younger voice from me 17 years ago, inviting you to reflect on what this might mean for you and for the world. My hope is that this 20-minute walk through the Stations of the Cross will lead you this Good Friday to a deeper sense of the depth of Christ's love for you and for all the world. So may God bless you along every step of this journey to the cross.
You are about to walk along the way of the cross, tracing the journey taken by Jesus on the last day of his earthly life. Over 14 stations you will travel with Jesus from the moment he was condemned to death to his entombment. This path has been walked by millions of people for almost 2,000 years. May God bless you on your journey.
The first station. Jesus is condemned to die. Betrayed by a friend, rejected by his people, and wrongfully condemned by the state, Jesus stands judged by sinners and sentenced to death upon the cruel torture device known as the Roman cross. In beginning his road to the cross, Jesus becomes one with everyone who has ever suffered, everyone who has ever bled or been scorned or been unfairly treated. Jesus' commitment to entering our lives completely begins its final steps. He has said yes to God and placed his life in God's hands. We follow him in this final surrender and contemplate with reverence each place along the way as he is broken and given for us.
As I view the scene, I become moved by both outrage and gratitude. I hear the hostile crowd cry out, "Crucify him." I look at Jesus, his face, the crown of thorns, the blood, his clothes stuck to the wounds on his back. Meanwhile, Pilate washes his hands of the whole bloody affair.
As the journey begins, I ask to be with Jesus, to be moved by his journey, that I may have the love and courage to endure each painful step with him.
The second station. Jesus carries his cross. Jesus is made to carry the cross on which he will die. It represents the weight of all our crosses. What he must have felt as he first took it upon his shoulders. With each step, he enters more deeply into our human experience. He walks in the path of human misery and suffering and experiences its crushing weight.
I contemplate the wood of that cross. I imagine how heavy it is. I reflect upon all it means that Jesus is carrying it. I look into his eyes. It's all there.
Moved by the power of his love, I am drawn to him and express my love in the words that come to me.
The third station. Jesus falls the first time. The weight is unbearable. Jesus falls under it. How could he enter our lives completely without surrendering to the crushing weight of the innocent and unjust suffering of so many on this earth? He lays on the ground and knows the experience of weakness beneath unfair burdens. He feels the powerlessness of wondering if he will ever be able to continue. He is pulled up and forced to continue.
I stare at the weakness in his eyes. I can look at his whole body and see the exhaustion. As I behold him there on the ground, being roughly pulled up, I forever how profoundly he understands my fatigue and my defeats.
I want to let him remain there. I know what it is like to miserably fall under sin's power, a cross's weight. I pray for strength to continue my journey, even when I feel that I can't go on.
The fourth station. Jesus meets his mother. Jesus' path takes him to a powerful source of his strength to continue. All his life, his mother has taught him the meaning of the words, "Behold the handmaid of the Lord." Now they look into each other's eyes. How pierced through her heart must be. How pained he must be to see her tears. Love and trust in God bind them together.
What must it be like to see your mother as you are walking to your own execution? The woman who bore you, the one who had so much hope for you. As I watch them in this place along the way, I contemplate the mystery of love's power to give strength. She knows the sorrow in every mother's heart who has lost a child to tragedy or violence. I look at the two of them very carefully and long for such love and such peace.
I pray for the steadfast faith Mary had, and the courage to stay by Jesus' side even when all others have fled.
The fifth station. Simon helps Jesus carry his cross. Jesus even experiences our struggle to receive help. He is made to experience the poverty of not being able to carry his burden alone. He enters into the experience of all who must depend on others to survive. He is deprived of the satisfaction of carrying this burden on his own.
I look into his face and contemplate his struggle, his weariness and fragility, his powerlessness. I see how he looks at Simon with utmost humility and gratitude.
Simon was not a priest, or a theologian, or even a saint. He was just passing by and got caught up in sharing the suffering love of Jesus. I pray that when my time comes to help bear others' crosses, that I would have the strength and courage of Simon.
The sixth station. Veronica wipes the face of Jesus. Jesus' journey is at times brutal. He has entered into the terrible experiences of rejection and injustice. He has been whipped and beaten. The blood that drips from the crown of thorns on his head mixes with the spit of those who mock him. His face shows the signs of his solidarity with all who have ever suffered injustice and vile, abusive treatment. He encounters a compassionate, loving disciple who wipes the vulgar spit and mocking blood from his face. On her veil she discovers the image of his face, his gift to her, and for us to contemplate forever.
What does the face of Jesus hold for me? What do I see as I look deeply into his face? Can I try to comfort the agony and pain? Can I embrace him with his face so covered with his passion?
Veronica is an example of someone who does the simple, compassionate act in a time of need. I pray that God would remind me that it's not always the big things that matter, but often the smallest that can have an impact.
The seventh station. Jesus falls a second time. Even with help, Jesus stumbles and falls to the ground. In deep exhaustion, he stares at the earth beneath him. Remember, you are dust, and to dust you will return. He has seen death before. Now he can feel the profound weakness of disability and disease and aging itself, there on his knees under the weight of his cross.
I contemplate Jesus brought very low, as I behold him there on the ground, with all the agony taking its toll on him. I let my heart go out to him. I store up this image in my heart, knowing that I will never feel alone in my suffering, with this image of Jesus on the ground before me.
This is for me. Jesus suffers such humiliation out of love for me. So I let this scene stir up deep gratitude.
The eighth station. Jesus meets the women of Jerusalem. Jesus broke so many barriers in his day. He touched lepers, he healed on the Sabbath, and he spoke to women in public. And now the women of Jerusalem and their children show their gratitude by meeting Jesus along the way and crying over his fate. He had broken all kinds of social and religious conventions to connect with them. Now they are here to support him. He feels their grief. He suffers, knowing he can't remain to help them more in this life. He knows the mystery of facing the separation of death.
I look at their faces, so full of love and gratitude, loss and fear. I contemplate what words might have passed between them. I remember all his tender, compassionate, merciful love for me. I place myself with these women and children to support him.
Jesus loved outsiders, the marginalized, the forgotten, the lonely. How painful it is to see that his only comforters are considered the weakest in his culture. Where are the strong, the influential, the powerful? I pray for the courage to stand with those who suffer as Jesus did, even when it is not popular.
The ninth station. Jesus falls a third time. This last fall is devastating. Jesus can barely proceed to the end. Summoning all his remaining strength, supported by his inner trust in God, Jesus collapses under the weight of the cross. His executioners look at him as a broken man, pathetic yet paying a price he deserves. They roughly grab him and half drag, half push him up the rest of the hill, where the cruel cross awaits.
I pause to contemplate him there on the ground, the brokenness that makes me whole, the surrender that gives me life. I pause to experience and receive how completely he loves me. He is indeed completely poured out for me.
I adore with fear and trembling. The fact that you allowed yourself to be so disgraced brings me to my knees. I pause in awe before such love.
The 10th station, Jesus is stripped. Part of the indignity of the cross is to be crucified naked. Jesus is completely stripped of any pride. The wounds on his back are torn open again. He experiences the ultimate vulnerability of the defenseless. No shield or security protects him. As they stare at him, his eyes turn to heaven.
I pause to watch the stripping. I contemplate all that is taken from him, and how he faces his death with such nakedness. I reflect upon how much of himself he has revealed to me. He has held nothing back.
Would I be able to love until the end, in the face of such cruelty, with no regard for human dignity? As I look at him in his humility, I pray that I may stand with courage when all is stripped from me.
The 11th station, Jesus is nailed to the cross. Huge, sharp spikes are hammered through his hands and feet to fix him on the cross. He is bleeding much more seriously now. As the cross is lifted up, the weight of his life hangs on those nails. Every time he struggles to pull himself up to breathe, his ability to cling to life slips away.
I make myself watch the nails being driven through his flesh, and I watch his face. I contemplate the completeness of his entry into our lives. Can there be any pain or agony he would not understand?
This is for me. Though you have done nothing wrong, you hang there on the cross. You hang there in my place. I stand in awe before such wondrous love.
The 12th station, Jesus dies on the cross. Between two criminals, a mocking title above his head, with only Mary and John and Mary Magdalene to support him, Jesus surrenders his last breath. Into your hands I commend my spirit.
I stand there at the foot of the cross, side by side with all of humanity, and behold our salvation. I carefully watch and listen to all that is said, and then I experience the one who gives life pass from life to death for me. I console Mary and John and Mary, and let them console me.
This is the hour to express the deepest feelings within me.
The 13th station, Jesus is taken down from the cross. What tender mourning. Jesus hasn't been held in his mother's arms since he was a baby, but now his lifeless body is taken down from the cross and laid across her lap. What tears, she cries. Her 33-year-old son lies dead in her shaking, helpless arms.
I behold this scene at the foot of the cross. I contemplate touching, caressing his body. I remember all his hands have touched, all who have been blessed by his warm embrace. I pause to let it soak in. He knows the mystery of death. He has fallen into God's hands.
Jesus has withheld nothing. All that he has, including his very life, he has given for me. I pour out my heart to the God of all mercies.
The 14th station. Jesus is laid in the tomb. They take the body of Jesus to its resting place. The huge stone over the tomb is the final sign of the permanence of death. Death is so final. In this final act of surrender, who would have imagined this tomb would soon be empty, or that Jesus would show himself alive to his disciples, or that they would recognize him in the breaking of bread? Oh, that our hearts might burn within us as we realize how he had to suffer and die so as to enter into glory for us.
I pause to contemplate this act of closure on his life. In solidarity with all humanity, his body is taken to its grave. I stand for a moment outside this tomb. This final journey of his life has shown me the meaning of his gift of himself for me. This tomb represents every tomb I stand before with fear, in defeat, struggling to believe it could ever be empty.
Even when all seems lost, God is still at work. Death is not the final word for me, for anyone. I pray for hope in the face of hopelessness and faith to believe in life from death.